Let's talk about fragments. As we navigate to different screens in our app, we can use different activities, or we can just use fragments, right? So, and the fragments are preferred way. So fragments were first introduced into the Android in Android 3, which is like Honeycomb, uh, when support for tablets were added. So before there was no support for tablets. So when the support for tablets added, uh, like uh, like so it like this was too small for tablets, and we needed to show the detail view. So if you notice on tablets, for example, if you like launch Telegram on tablet, like on Planchet, you will see that you will see the list and its details in one window. So to achieve that, uh, we need fragments. We can do that with fragments. Uh, so like intuition is here that this will be one fragment and this will be another fragment. And in case of just phone, we will launch those fragments separately, like right. So in case of tablet, we will launch them instantly. So we can see them, two of them at once. So it turns out that breaking up the structure of your UI into fragments is useful in other contexts besides the building for tablets. And the fragments are the core concept to understand when building apps in Android. So these are really important. And nowadays, there is a good pattern called single activity architecture. So, which states that, okay, here Rush not so yeah, I think we can, yeah, this one. So, single activity, yeah, or this one, yeah. We have a great video explaining that benefits of single activity. Let me add it to speaker notes. Where is it? This one. And yeah, here Google explains all benefits of using single activity rather than using multiple activities. So when you use single activity, you need to use fragments, right? So and that's why this is important. So, and that's why I haven't covered like explicit intents using activity. So I haven't shown you an example of that, right? Okay, let's continue. So fragments represents a behavior or a portion of UI in an activity, and you can think of it as a micro activity. You can display multiple fragments in a single activity, uh, as in case of tablet, or you can reuse fragment in multiple activities. So, like, pay attention. These questions will be in quiz, and you can think of fragment as a modular section of activity that has its own life cycle, receives its own input events, and also you can add and remove them while activity is running. Yeah, let's see an example, right? So if it's too difficult, let's see an example. Okay, okay, let's launch our app. So all of these are fragments. So this one is home fragment. This one, right? And uh, this one is forecast fragment. So if you notice that in this app, we have only one activity, which is main activity, right? And we have several fragments. So one activity can contain several fragments. And by runtime, we can add uh, and replace existing fragments with each other. So this is a bottom navigation view, which is replacing the fragments with each other. Okay, and we can reuse this forecast fragment in different places. So we can, like, I think here we don't have example of that. Let's take example of that. Launch. So by the way, this is a great example of implicit intent, right? So we are launching another app which is used to rate our app. Okay. Yeah, we don't have examples of that, but it's like so we can use like fragment in different places, not only this place. We can use it different places or in different activities. One fragment can be used in different activities also. Okay. So and the fragment has its own life cycle. So I will cover it in next lesson about life cycles. So for example, in activity we had method called on create, right? So we have other methods called like on destroy and so on. And the fragment also has such methods. So it has like on create and on destroy, on pause, and so on. But fragment has one like several different methods than activity, and one of them is on create view. This method is what we usually define our view. So in this method, we have to, like here we are using binding. We can just layout inflator for that, but yeah, let's use binding, right? So we need to provide our view. So we need to return binding.root, right? So which returns view itself. And this is the difference between fragment and activity. And it has also own view created method. Let's see. Activity. Okay. Okay, activity has also a create view method, but it's different from fragment, right? Well, you know how to. So yeah, let's continue. And when using fragment class, be sure that you use version provided by the Android X package instead of fragment provided in the platform. So don't use this one because it's like deprecated and it's not suitable with more with other libraries. Okay, in the pathway you have a great example of defining fragments. To define fragment, you can just like do this one new uh, fragment. Then let's select blank fragment and call it like let's call it blank fragment, right? Then let's add it. So here we have defined a new fragment. But to connect to that fragment, we need to define something called navigation. And let's see. So navigation within an app. Uh, the navigation component is a collection of libraries, tooling, and ID integrations for creating navigation paths uh, through an app. It works best with the paradigm of one activity, many fragments, which is this one, right? And uh, it's composed of three parts that work together uh, with each other to achieve the navigation. The first one is called navigation graph. It represents a set of destination fragments or activities that your app is able to display. So if we take example of TV, right? this would be a list of available programs to watch. And the navigation host is a container that displays the destinations listed in your navigation graph. It's like in TV, it's like monitor. So it's displaying uh, destinations, right? Displaying your channels or programs. And the third one is called navigation controller. Uh, it means like it manages the navigation between different destinations. So in TV analogy, it's like equivalent to the TV remote or like remote control, right? It's used to switch different programs and the channels. So this is like logic, this is like container, and this is like graph where those destinations are defined. Uh, and yeah, fragments can link to other fragments, creating a full graph of destinations, while activities can only be a terminal destination for the graph, meaning that they are always an endpoint on the graph. Each activity can have its own navigation graph, but this provides less benefit than having all destinations in a single graph. So when you use multiple activities, it's difficult to use navigation component because each activity needs to define its own navigation graph. So you cannot see whole picture in one graph, right? So it's like uh, not feasible, right? To begin working with navigation component, we need to add some dependencies to our build Gradle app file. And for the nav version, you can look at the current version of the navigation component, which is available here. Yeah, but I think in Password you just use like constant version for that. Let's skip it for now. And yeah, let's start with our navigation host, which is an empty container where the destinations are swapped in and out as a user navigates through your app. A navigation host must implement the navhost interface. The default navhost implementation is a navhost fragment. So this is one like default implementation. It's provided by fragment library, and it handles swapping fragment destinations for you. So let's use it. Um, and we use the fragment XML to declare a navhost fragment within the activity XML layout. So, for example, if we have activity, let's open like example. Right? We have here we have activity main, and here we see that we are defining fragment, and we are using the default navhost fragment. So navhost fragment is like container, right? And uh, so where we have stopped. Uh, okay, yeah. So we need to use this fragment tag, and we need to include the navhost fragment as a name attribute, and it has a couple of other important attributes, which is like default navhost, and this is set to true. That means that this navigation host will intercept the system's back button tabs. So, uh, back button is just when you tap back button, right? So let's see. In this smartphone, it's this gesture, right? So this is a back button. So if you set this true, this navhost fragment will handle that tabs. And the nav graph, it points to the navigation graph listing all of our fragment destinations. So let's see it. In this case, it's this one. So here we see that here we can see our graph. It's just design, right? And we see that we have like different destinations, right? Uh, and this is our nav graph file. So it defines destinations and it can also define actions. Okay. So you can see this documentation. So I've attached links to speaker notes. So if you want to like read more, right, understand. Now let's continue. Uh, to define a navigation, you need to create a navigation graph that contains all of your destinations and the actions between them, and it represents all the possible navigation paths within your activity. And this example shows a visual representation of a navigation graph for a sample app with destinations and the actions that connect them. So this is your pathway app. So in pathway, you will implement this one. And this is like example of that, right? So another example. So this is another example. And mm, so yeah, another important thing is that you can specify animations for entering or exiting. So in Android, we can have different types of animations like fade in, fade out. You can just Google them like fade in, fade out, and other like so just Google like different types of animation. Android like. So yeah, these are animations, and you can specify them too. So when you, for example, click here play, it will animate the transition between these two screens. Yeah, let's continue. Okay. And in Android Studio, the design view of the navigation graph resource file shows you a visual representation of connections between different destinations. So in this case, it's showing that when you have some action that when you click on that action, it will launch the game fragment, right? And same for here. So intuitively you can understand, right? So when you click, for example, submit, if answer is true, this action is shows congratulations fragment, and this will show like game over fragment, right? Uh, okay, so let's see, right? Design, and here you can see your component tree. And you can see the actions and so on. Here you can define your animations. Uh, Here you can define something called pop behavior. So let's see. Okay, creating a fragment. So let's talk about fragment. And to create a fragment, you need to extend fragment class, but we just created them using this helper, right? So new fragment and so on. And it automatically extends the fragment class for us, right? And in an activity, you use it on create method, but within the fragment, you don't need to use it. And instead, you can use on create view method. To inflate your layout, and yeah, it will show the layout you have inflated. when you switch to that fragment. So let's add that fragment to our distillation, say distillation, to our graph. So you can add them directly inside XML, so you can just type here, or you can add them through the navigation editor uh, and by doing this one. So it's create new destination and let's type here blank fragment blank, right? And we see that it added blank fragment as a destination, and this will also automatically assign ID for that. So this is important. ID is important, and it will default label it defaultly, so we can label it something like you can understand. Like that. And you can also add action to that fragment. So let's add some action from settings fragment to blank fragment, right? Let's move it to here. Let's add some action. If you do so, you can just add action. You can do also it from XML. So here we see that this action was added, which navigates from settings fragment to blank fragment. So this is a default naming, so you can always change it. Like this one, right? And you see that as a destination, we use it blank fragment ID. Mm, So here is a syntax for specifying fragment and action. We already have seen that. And after naming all your paths to actually navigate to them, you need to use map controller. So within actions that you have specified. So let's see. You can within an activity you can find map controller using the following snippet. Okay, okay. In activity we don't have any buttons, so let's do it from. Okay, let's do it from home fragment, right? So let's add some action from home fragment to the blank fragment. One. Okay, so we have added it, and let's switch to the home fragment. And here, when we click on that, we will just navigate navigate to blank fragment, right? And yeah, Scott plus Scott. Okay, find the controller. We need to import it. Then we need to specify here. You can just remove this one, I think. Here we can action home fragment to blank fragment, right? And yeah, let's run it. So when we click on this text view, it will launch our hello blank fragment. And if you notice, it uses instant weather as its label, right? So and the UI of this blank fragment is defined in this layout. So here you can add anything, and it will be shown here, right? And we don't need these ones for now. Let's remove all of them. And this is a minimum code. Run any fragment. So this is a minimum code uh, to run our fragment, right? Okay, let's continue.